Tobago, if they care about the First Peoples, if they understand really that they are the indigenous people of Trinidad and Tobago, you would recall that one of the things they did was to take away their reforestation contract, which is very important to the survival of the First Peoples. The two other matters that I would like to deal with really has to do with the failure of the government to answer the question filed as it relates to the firing of the Chief of Defense Force. They use the section 27 of urgent questions, which basically says that a minister could refuse to answer a question if he believes that it could be contrary to public interest. And this is a pattern that this government has been adopting by refusing to answer questions. The third one really has to do with the information coming today that the price of oil is now $58.40 or 50 cents, and we wait with great interest to see exactly how this government is going to approach the budget. We maintain our position as it relates to Mr. Lee. You would have seen that he talks about something as it relates to timing and probably somebody having some sort of documents as it relates to his case. We are saying to the Honorable Prime Minister, do the same that you did as it relates to what you said in case of Mr. Warner, what you said in relation to, I think it was Mr. Ramlogan. Your position was consistent. As a matter of fact, you said in relation to Mr. Warner that you cannot return to the house of the rising sun until you clear your name. And therefore, we are asking this Prime Minister to do the same as it relates to Mr. David Lee. Any questions?
Mentioned just now the price of oil. Given your experience, Mr. Imbert, as your tenure as finance minister, what would have been your, I want to say, expectations or your plan heading into this year's budget, given the information that you have?
Well, there are two problems. There is the price of oil, which really has been dropping. We haven't seen that kind of price now since around 2016. The price of oil started to drop in 2014, continued through 2015, and then dropped to $25 in 2016. It stayed in the 40s and the 50s for quite a while, then recovered into the 60s and remained at the 60s until COVID, when it went back down to zero and then came back up. But $58 oil price is a very difficult oil price. That's problem number one in terms of revenue. But the other problem is oil production. And I notice we're not getting information from the government on oil production and gas production. So the government gets its revenue from the petroleum sector in two ways: the price and the volume. Volumes are down, prices are down. So that the budget estimates, unless they are going to be inflated, the government is going to have a real problem in terms of achieving the kind of revenues it needs to run this country. The UNC had inflated the expenditure from 46 billion in 2010 up to 63 billion in 2014, 2015. It's impossible for them to generate that kind of revenue, but they raised expectations in the country that the country needs about $60 billion a year to run. Very, very difficult. And that does not take into account all the promises they made. So I have no idea what they're going to do, but I certainly would not have supported the kind of promises they have made. It's going to lead to billions and billions of dollars for expenditure. I do hope that they are going to be genuine and honest in terms of revenue. Because we will look at the revenue and we have a fair idea of what it should be. I hope they're not going to inflate it.
Generally, I mean, for the average layman, the things they would look at in a budget is how much we spending, how much we making, the deficit. They have already said it's going to be a deficit budget, and which ministry is going to get the or which ministries have gotten the most, and it's usually consistent: health, education, security. But regarding the budget deficit, what do you think is an acceptable figure based on what you would have seen before you left as finance minister? What do you understand?
Benchmark is 3% of GDP. Our GDP is about 180 billion, or it was. So you're looking at about $5 billion maximum. If they go beyond that, they're looking for trouble.
And what sort of trouble? How do you explain that to the average man? What sort of
Well, it
trouble?
means they have to borrow. So the deficit is the difference between revenue and expenditure. So let's say you have a $10 billion deficit. It means you're spending 50 billion, collecting 40 billion. You have to go and borrow. The more you borrow, you end up with two problems. One, it leads to a downgrade by the credit rating agencies because they form the opinion that the debt is unsustainable. And two, you have to spend more money on debt servicing because it's not free, you have to pay it back. So that your debt servicing component of your budget, which is a charge on your budget, there are some things you have to pay immediately. It's a mandatory charge on your expenditure that you pay your debt servicing. So the more you borrow, the more your debt servicing is. And the higher your deficit is, the more you have to pay. The more difficult it is because there's less money available for other things like the development program, goods and services, paying bills owed to contractors and suppliers and that sort of thing. And one of the things they did, we had raised significant sums of money to deal with arrears owed to contractors and suppliers and all the state enterprises. They took all of that money and transferred it into the government's current account to pay salaries. So those bills are still there for the HDC, for WASA, for UD, they're all there. Those bills are still there at the time. So they've made life very difficult for themselves.
Well, in addition to that, though, notwithstanding what was just said, I mean, you still continue the complaints, of course, about people not receiving, whether it's pension late, or people are still receiving salaries late or not receiving at all. So that is another interesting development that we would have to address.
Sum it up, the government is in a very difficult. And this does not take into account all of the promises that they made.
Do you think if the PNM was still in government that you will face that same difficult situation?
But we faced it in 2015. We came in and we found an expenditure profile of 60 billion and we reduced that to 50 billion. We were very careful about how we did it. But for years, we were able to run the country on a $50 billion expenditure envelope. And what they have done and what they have promised is going to be impossible for them to run the country on a $50 billion expenditure envelope. They're just not prudent. That's what it is.
Ms. Beckles, is there anything in particular the opposition would like to see in the budget? Any particular sort of expenditure or anything like that?
Well, I mean, one of the main things is to address this matter as it relates to the almost 40,000 plus people who are on the breadline. I mean, what is the government's position as it relates to the whole issue of CPEP, URP, reforestation? You know, they talked about an audit, a number of things, but so we wait eagerly because that's a large number of the people. I mean, as a member of parliament during the vacation, you know, people simply couldn't afford school books, uniform, can't pay their rent, all those basic things that people expect. So people are waiting patiently to see how they are going to address those issues. The fact that the price of oil is now going downward under $60 and it hasn't done for the last 10 years. We await to see what is the government's policy as it relates to revenue generation, which is really very critical. Because, you know, the fact that you have basically done away with property tax, you know, but where are you going to get this revenue? You have closed down the TTRA. So we are waiting very patiently to hear from them. What is their position on revenue generation?
What I would like to see is a commitment to paying people their salaries, their wages, their allowances on time. This is something new in Trinidad and Tobago. Even though we had to cut expenditure from 60 billion to 50 billion and run the country on a $50 billion envelope for years, we still focus on making sure people got their wages, their salaries, their allowances on time. That was our priority number one.
Even during COVID as well.
Yeah, even, and especially during COVID. I would like to see a commitment from the government to that in this budget.
As we know very well, I mean, let's pensioners. I mean, we're talking about persons generally, but I mean, in a sense, a lot of people do live month to month, and a lot of people live fortnight to fortnight. So that if you give a person a check, as we realized over the last couple of days, and they went to the bank, I mean, I'm sure you all would have heard it. People went to the bank with their pension check, and the bank said there is no money. I mean, we haven't heard that in Trinidad and Tobago. I don't recall us
Never.
getting into that situation. So that is one of the things that we are saying to the government. I mean, that should never happen.
Right. And going back to the David Lee issue, my final question. There's been I don't know if it's cultural in Trinidad, and of course we would know the conversations that happen behind the scenes, but it always appears as if when somebody does something or is accused of something wrongdoing, that they have to be forced either by the political leader or by the whoever it may be to resign rather than willingly step down, as we would see take place, for example, in Europe, in England, for example, you see people stepping down. Do you think, one, that it's a cultural issue, and two, do you expect that Mr. Lee will resign, or do you think you'll have to be, the political leader will have to make that decision?
Well, he was asked a question today by the press, and he made it clear that his colleagues and the Prime Minister is standing by him, and that the issue doesn't arise. But I mean, we have seen where traditionally the public feels strongly about it. You would find that that is a matter that they would put certainly a lot more pressure on him, and the possibility exists, but I can't see, because he seems to be very clear that he has the support, and therefore that's not a position that he intends to adopt.
There's a comment I'd like to make on that. I noticed that somebody sent me a video from previous time Mr. Lee found himself in difficulty. And he said it was a political witch hunt by the then Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley. I was looking at video today. So what is it now? A witch hunt by the current Prime Minister, Ms. Visasa? Because the PNM is not in government anymore.
Yeah, because at that time they blamed us. They were saying that it's the PNM who was responsible for the difficulty in which he finds himself. Yeah. But within a 6 months period, you now have a situation where the DPP has decided that there is sufficient evidence there where he should again be called to answer. So we await his position. Okay. Thank you very much.